The Velthian council chamber had never been this loud. Voices overlapped each other in desperate arguments as holographic displays showed the latest devastation. Another 3 colony stations gone. Just like that. Hundreds of thousands of Velthians were now either dead or scattered across space in escape pods, hoping someone would find them before their life support ran out. Council leader Vex stood at the center of the circular chamber, his usually calm demeanor cracking under the pressure. His hands shook as he pulled up the damage reports. The Krell Empire wasn't just attacking anymore. They were systematically erasing Velthian civilization from the star maps. "We have to do something," one council member shouted. "Anything." "Do what exactly?" another snapped back. "We're traders, not warriors. Our defense fleet has 12 ships. 12? The Krell have thousands." Vex closed his eyes. They were right. The Velthian Confederation had spent centuries building a peaceful society based on commerce and diplomacy. They had no standing army, no weapons development programs, no military academies. Why would they need such things? The galaxy had been at peace for generations. Until the Krell decided peace was boring. In the lower levels of the council building, Junior Officer Trin sat alone in the communications archive room. The young Velthian had been given a simple task: search through their historical databases and find anyone who might help. Any old alliance, any forgotten treaty, any species that owed them a favor. He'd been searching for 6 hours straight. His eyes burned from staring at ancient text files. Most of the entries were useless. Trade agreements from centuries ago with species that no longer existed. Diplomatic channels to civilizations that had collapsed. Peace treaties with empires that had moved to other galaxies. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Trin rubbed his face tiredly. What was he even doing? Who would help them anyway? The other civilizations in their sector were either too weak to fight the Krell or too smart to get involved. Nobody wanted to become the Krell's next target. He was about to give up when his scanner highlighted something unusual. A file buried so deep in the archives that it still used the old precursor coding language. The label was corrupted, but he could make out partial words. Emergency protocol. Ancient beacon. Restricted access. His curiosity got the better of him. Trin opened the file. The screen exploded with warnings. Red text flashed in languages he didn't recognize. Something about containment protocols and observation mandates. But buried in all that noise was a single green button labeled, Activate Emergency Beacon. Trin stared at it. This was probably a terrible idea. The file was 4,000 cycles old. Whatever this beacon connected to was likely long gone. But then again, what did they have to lose? The Krell would wipe them out in a matter of weeks at this rate. His trembling finger pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire archive room hummed with power. Ancient systems that hadn't been used in millennia suddenly roared to life. The beacon transmitted, sending its signal racing across the galaxy at speeds that shouldn't have been possible. Trin sat back, his heart's pounding. What had he just done? The next 72 hours were agony. The Krell destroyed another mining outpost. Refugee ships poured into the remaining Velthian stations. The council held emergency session after emergency session, but every discussion ended the same way: they had no options. Vex was in his private office, reviewing evacuation plans when his communicator chirped. It was Trin, and the young officer sounded terrified. "Sir, you need to come to the archive room. Now." When Vex arrived, he found Trin staring at a holographic display with wide eyes. On the screen was a message in perfect galactic standard. The timestamp showed it had arrived just minutes ago. Distress signal received. United Earth forces responding. Hold your position. Vex read it 3 times. United Earth forces? What is that? Some kind of mercenary group? Trin shook his head frantically. I don't know, sir. I activated an old beacon and this is what responded. The database has almost nothing on them. Just one entry listing their homeworld as a restricted zone with observation-only protocols. The file is ancient. How ancient? 4,000 cycles, sir. Vex felt a chill run down his spine. Restricted zones were put in place by the precursors for dangerous worlds. Quarantine planets. Places where something had gone terribly wrong. Any indication of their military capability? Vex asked. None, sir. But... Trin pulled up another display. They asked how long until they arrive. I gave them our coordinates. They said 5 days. The 2 Velthians looked at each other in stunned silence. 5 days. Vex whispered. That's impossible. The nearest star system is weeks away at standard FTL speeds. I know, sir. Vex turned back to the message. 5 days. Either these Earth forces had technology far beyond anything the Velthians understood, or they were lying. And if they were lying, then the Velthians had just wasted their last hope on a species that might not even exist anymore. Well, Vex said quietly, any help is better than none. Even if it's just one ship. Neither of them could have imagined how wrong that assumption would be. The shuttle touched down on Velthian Station Alpha's main hangar bay exactly 5 days after the message was sent. Not 5 days and 6 hours. Not 4 days and 20 hours. Exactly 5 days. That alone should have told the Velthians something important about the humans. Captain Rebecca Hayes was the first to step off the ramp. She was tall, easily 6 feet, with short blonde hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her uniform was dark blue with silver insignia that caught the hangar lights. Behind her came Lieutenant Kyle Morrison and 6 security personnel, all moving with a smooth, purposeful stride that made the Velthian dock workers instinctively step back. The humans weren't just tall. They were built differently. Broader shoulders. Thicker muscle mass. They moved like apex predators, even though their expressions were calm and professional. Every step was balanced. Every movement was controlled. These weren't diplomats or traitors. These were warriors. Vex and Trin waited at the edge of the landing pad. Vex had put on his formal council robes, though his hands kept fidgeting with the fabric. Trin stood beside him, barely able to contain his nervous energy. Captain Hayes, Vex said, stepping forward with as much dignity as he could muster. His voice only shook a little. We weren't expecting anyone so quickly. Your homeworld is listed as being in a completely different sector. The journey alone should have taken weeks. Rebecca's expression didn't change. We were in the area conducting exercises. Lucky timing. It was a complete lie and Kyle had to resist smiling. They'd actually traveled from Earth at speeds that would have made every physicist in the Velthian Confederation question their understanding of physics. But there was no point in explaining that yet. I see, Vex said, clearly not seeing it all. Well, we're grateful for any assistance you can provide. If you'll follow me to the command center, we can discuss the situation. The walk through the station was uncomfortable for the Velthians. Everywhere they went, crowds gathered to stare at the humans. Children pointed. Adults whispered. Some looked hopeful. Others looked terrified. Rebecca noticed a young Velthian mother pull her child closer as they passed. The look in the woman's eyes wasn't just fear of strangers. It was the fear of someone who had seen too much violence and didn't know if these newcomers were salvation or just another threat. That look hardened something in Rebecca's chest. The command center was a circular room filled with holographic displays and nervous council members. They all stood when the humans entered, though Rebecca wasn't sure if it was respect or instinct. Prey animals often froze when predators entered the room. Please show us what we're dealing with, Rebecca said. Vex pulled up the footage. The first clip showed a Velthian colony station. Peaceful. Civilians going about their daily lives. Then the Krell ships arrived. No warning. No demands. Just immediate weapons fire. The station's shields lasted maybe 30 seconds before collapsing. Then the Krell boarded. Rebecca watched without expression as the footage showed Krell warriors moving through corridors, killing everyone they found. Women. Children. Elderly. It didn't matter. The Krell weren't interested in prisoners or negotiations. Kyle's jaw tightened. Behind him, one of the security team members muttered something under her breath that definitely wasn't regulation language. They've destroyed 18 stations in the last 2 months, Vex said quietly. We've lost over 2 million citizens. Our defense fleet engaged them once. All 12 of our ships were destroyed in less than an hour. We don't have a military. We've never needed one before. Rebecca turned away from the footage. How many Krell ships are we looking at? Intelligence suggests their main battle fleet has over 800 vessels, Trin spoke up from his corner. With another 2,000 in reserve across their empire. One of the council members, an elderly Velthian with gray scales, leaned forward. Captain Hayes, we appreciate you coming all this way. Truly. But we must be realistic. How many ships can your people send? Even if you brought 50 or 100 vessels, the Krell would still outnumber you significantly. We don't want you to sacrifice yourselves for a losing battle. Rebecca looked at Kyle. Something passed between them. Some unspoken understanding that made Kyle's expression shift from grim to almost predatory. Sir, Rebecca said, turning back to face Vex directly. Do you know what a precursor distress beacon is? It's an old emergency system, Vex said. From before the current galactic order. It's more than that, Rebecca continued. It's a call for aid under ancient laws that supersede all current treaties and agreements. When someone activates one of those beacons, they're not hiring mercenaries. They're not requesting assistance. They're invoking the oldest law in the galaxy, that those who can help must help. No payment. No negotiation. No debate. Vex stared at her. I don't understand. You asked how many ships we can send, Rebecca said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. That's the wrong question. You activated a distress beacon. That means we're not sending what we can spare. We're not sending a token force to make ourselves feel better. She stepped closer to the holographic display, her reflection mixing with the images of destroyed stations and dead civilians. We're sending everything. The command center went absolutely silent. Everything? Vex whispered. Kyle stepped forward. The third fleet is already en route. 847 ships. They'll be here in 2 weeks. 800. Trin's voice failed him. Rebecca's expression softened just slightly. You called for help. We're answering. And when humans answer a call like that, we don't do it halfway. 2 weeks felt like 2 years for the Velthians. Every day brought new reports of Krell movements. Every hour, someone checked the scanners hoping to see the human fleet. Every minute felt like it might be their last. Vex had stopped sleeping. He spent his nights in the command center, staring at star maps and casualty reports. 3 more outposts had fallen in the past week. The Krell were getting bolder, pushing deeper into Velthian space. They knew the Confederation was helpless. Trin had become something of a celebrity on the station. The young officer who had accidentally saved them all. Or doomed them. Nobody was quite sure which yet. He handled the attention poorly, mostly hiding in the sensor room and obsessively monitoring long-range scanners. On the 14th day at exactly 0600 station time, every alarm in the command center went off at once. Trin's hands flew across his console, his heart's racing. Sir. Multiple FTL signatures incoming. Hundreds of them. Vex felt his blood turn to ice. The Krell? Please not yet. Please let the humans arrive first. Please. Checking identification codes now, Trin said, his voice shaking. The computer took what felt like forever to process the data. Then his screen lit up with a single word that made him laugh with relief. No, sir. They're transmitting Earth identification codes. Every council member in the command center rushed to the windows. Outside, space itself seemed to tear open. The fleet arrived not in a scattered mess, but in perfect formation. 847 ships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously, like they'd been choreographed. Small destroyers and frigates formed the outer perimeter. Cruisers and battleships created the middle layers. And in the center, like monuments to human engineering, were the carriers. The largest human ship was 3 times the size of the biggest station in Velthian space. It hung there in the void, its hull covered in weapons batteries and launch bays. Smaller ships swarmed around it like protective children. By the ancestors, Vex whispered. He'd seen military fleets before. The Krell had impressive armadas. But this was different. This wasn't just a collection of ships. This was a single unified war machine. Then every screen on the station flickered. Every display. Every communicator. Every holographic projector. All of them showed the same image. A human man in his 50s with gray hair and hard eyes. He wore a crisp uniform with more medals than Vex could count. This is Admiral James Cortez of the United Earth Third Fleet. The man's voice boomed across every speaker. As of this moment, the Velthian Confederation is under the protection of Earth. Any attack on Velthian territory or citizens will be considered an act of war against humanity. Any hostile action will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. This is your only warning. The transmission was being broadcast on every frequency. Every species in the sector was hearing this, including the Krell. The command center erupted in cheers. Velthians who had been living in fear for months suddenly had hope. Some were crying. Others were embracing. Trin just sat at his console, stunned by what he'd accidentally unleashed. The celebration lasted exactly 53 minutes. That's when the Krell response came through. The holographic display in the center of the command center activated, showing a Krell war leader. The alien was massive, covered in thick scales and battle scars. Its eyes were cold and reptilian. The Krell Dominion does not recognize Earth's authority in this sector, the war leader hissed. You are intruding in internal Dominion affairs. Your fleet has 1 hour to withdraw. If you refuse, you will be destroyed. We have crushed countless civilizations. You will be no different. The transmission cut off. Silence filled the command center. The brief moment of hope evaporated. The Velthians looked at each other nervously. The Krell weren't backing down. They were going to fight. And when the Krell fought, they fought with overwhelming numbers. Then Admiral Cortez's face appeared on the screens again. But this time he wasn't making a formal announcement. He was responding directly to the Krell threat. The Admiral's expression was completely calm. Almost bored. When he spoke, his voice carried no anger, no fear, no hesitation. Come try. 2 words. That was it. Then the transmission ended. Vex felt his hands shaking. That's all he said? Come try. Doesn't he understand what he's facing? Rebecca Hayes, who had remained on the station to coordinate with the Velthian command staff, stood near the window watching the human fleet. She smiled grimly. Oh, he understands perfectly, she said. The Admiral spent 20 years fighting the siege wars in the outer colonies. He's faced worse odds than this. Worse? A council member gasped. The Krell are sending 300 warships. We've seen their battle records. Each one is heavily armed and carries thousands of soldiers. Rebecca turned to face them. Her expression was the same one she'd worn when watching footage of Krell atrocities. That cold, hard look that said she'd made a decision and nothing would change it. 300 ships, she repeated. The Admiral brought 847. Plus, he has something the Krell don't. What's that? Vex asked. He's fought humans before. He knows what we're capable of when we're angry. Rebecca looked back out at the fleet. The Krell are about to learn that lesson the hard way. 16 hours later, Krell sensors detected a massive hyperspace signature. The 6th Battle Fleet emerged from FTL at the edge of Velthian space. 300 warships, battle-hardened and confident. They were expecting an easy victory. They were wrong. The Krell's 6th Battle Fleet arrived with all the confidence of a predator that had never met a bigger predator. 300 warships dropped out of hyperspace in a traditional Krell formation, a massive wedge designed to punch through enemy lines and scatter defenders. From the command center on Velthian Station Alpha, Vex and his council watched the tactical display with growing dread. The Krell ships were massive, each one bristling with weapons. They'd seen these vessels before, watched them tear through Velthian defenses like they were made of paper. They're moving into attack formation, Trin reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Weapons charging. They're targeting the human fleet. The human ships weren't moving. They just hung there in space, perfectly arranged in a formation the Velthians didn't recognize. It looked almost casual, like they were waiting for something. Then Admiral Cortez's voice came through the command center speakers, calm and professional. All ships weapons free. Engage at will. What happened next would be studied in military academies for the next 100 years. The human fleet didn't charge forward. They didn't try to match the Krell formation. Instead, they simply opened fire from where they were, and the Krell learned that human weapons had a much longer range than anything they'd encountered before. Railguns fired solid metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. The Krell shields, designed to stop energy weapons, did absolutely nothing against kinetic projectiles. The first wave of fire punched through 12 Krell ships before their commanders even realized they were under attack. Impossible. A Krell war leader screamed across open channels. They're too far away. No weapon has that range. But the humans weren't done. Missile pods opened across the fleet, launching thousands of projectiles. The Krell activated their jamming systems, the same systems that had protected them in countless battles. The missiles didn't even slow down. Their jamming isn't working. Trin stared at his display in disbelief. The human missiles are ignoring it. Rebecca Hayes stood beside him, watching calmly. Our missiles don't rely on external signals. They have independent AI guidance systems. You can't jam an intelligence that makes its own decisions. The Krell fleet tried to close the distance, hoping to use their superior numbers in close combat. That's when they discovered the second surprise. Human ships were fast. Impossibly fast. Destroyers and frigates darted around Krell battleships like sharks around whales, hitting weak points and dodging return fire with movements that shouldn't have been possible for ships that size. How are they moving like that? Vex asked. Their vessels should be limited by the same physics as everyone else. They are, Rebecca replied. But human ships are designed differently. We built our vessels expecting to get hit. Our hulls are thick. Our crews wear restraint systems. We can pull maneuvers that would kill the crew of any other ship because we're designed to survive the acceleration. The battle became a massacre. Krell ships that tried to retreat found human vessels blocking their escape routes. Krell ships that tried to stand and fight were systematically torn apart by coordinated fire from multiple human vessels. Then the boarding actions began. Commander Eric Thompson led the assault on the Krell flagship. His Marines hit the disabled vessel in 12 different locations simultaneously, cutting through the hull with plasma torches and pouring inside. The Krell defenders were ready. They were experienced warriors who had fought hundreds of battles. They set up defensive positions in the corridors, confident they could repel any boarding party. They'd never fought humans before. The Marines moved through the ship in small teams, using tactics that made no sense to the Krell. They didn't advance in formation. They didn't hold positions. They just kept pushing forward, adapting to every defense the Krell erected. When the Krell blocked a corridor, the humans went through the walls. When the Krell set up ambushes, the humans detected them with scanning equipment and attacked from unexpected angles. When individual humans were injured, their teammates dragged them to safety and kept fighting. They don't stop. A Krell commander's voice crackled across the communication channels, panic evident in his tone. We kill one and 3 more take his place. They just keep coming. Commander Thompson's voice cut through the chaos, calm and professional. Second team, flank left. Fourth team, secure that junction. First team with me. The Marines fought with a precision that terrified the Krell. Every movement was practiced. Every tactic was executed perfectly. These weren't soldiers who had trained for battle. These were soldiers who had been in more battles than the Krell could count. 4 hours after it began, the Battle of Velthian space was over. The surviving Krell ships fled in complete disorder. Of 300 vessels, only 47 made it back to Krell space. Most were damaged. All were carrying stories of the demons from Earth. In the command center, Vex stood in stunned silence, watching the tactical display. The human fleet had barely taken any damage. A few ships showed minor hull breaches. Nothing serious. What are they? Vex whispered. Kyle Morrison, who had been standing quietly at the back of the command center throughout the battle, overheard the question. He walked over to where the Velthian leader stood. We're humans, sir, Kyle said simply. His tone wasn't boastful. It was just matter of fact. And we're really good at one thing, protecting people who can't protect themselves. Vex looked at the human officer. What? You barely know us. We can't pay you. We have nothing to offer. Why risk your lives for strangers? Kyle was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because someone has to. And because we remember what it was like when no one helped us. 3 months had passed since the battle. 3 months of change that transformed Velthian space in ways no one could have predicted. The human fleet hadn't just parked in orbit and called it mission accomplished. They'd actually stayed and helped rebuild. Engineers from Earth worked alongside Velthian construction crews, installing defense platforms that made the old Velthian systems look like toys. Military advisors taught Velthian volunteers how to defend themselves, not with aggression, but with the kind of tactical thinking that came from centuries of hard lessons. Captain Rebecca Hayes had become a familiar sight on Station Alpha, walking the corridors and actually learning Velthian names. She'd sit in the station's cafeteria eating their food, even though human digestion didn't always agree with it, because it mattered to them that she tried. Trin had changed too. The nervous young officer who'd accidentally activated an ancient beacon now walked with more confidence. He'd been promoted twice and was currently helping coordinate the new defense network. Sometimes he still couldn't believe what he'd started. But now it was time for the humans to leave. Admiral Cortez stood in the council chamber one last time, his dress uniform perfectly pressed, his expression softer than it had been during the battle. The entire Velthian council had gathered, along with what seemed like half the station's population watching from balconies and doorways. Vex stepped forward, holding a ceremonial data pad with a prepared speech. Then he set it aside. I have to ask, Vex said quietly. Why did you really come? You traveled across the galaxy. You risked your lives. You lost 17 crew members in the battle. All for people you'd never met. Why? Admiral Cortez was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber. Officer Trin activated a precursor distress beacon. Do you know what that means? He didn't wait for an answer. It's a signal that says, we're dying, someone please help. It's the oldest cry for help in the known universe. And my species has been listening to the galaxy for a very long time. He walked to the large window overlooking the station's central plaza, where Velthian families were going about their daily lives. Children playing. Markets operating. Normal life returned. We've been watching from behind our quarantine barrier for centuries, Cortez continued. Observing. Learning. Waiting for the right moment to step onto the galactic stage. And then we heard your call. A peaceful people being slaughtered for no reason other than someone else's greed. The admiral turned back to face the council. Our ancestors nearly destroyed themselves. We fought wars that killed billions. We poisoned our own planet. We came so close to extinction that our history books still make people cry when they read them. But we survived. And we learned. We built something better. His voice grew stronger. We decided that if we ever got the chance, if we ever had the power, we would never stand by and watch innocents suffer. Because we remember what it felt like when no one helped us. Trin stepped forward from where he'd been standing with the other officers. His voice shook slightly. Admiral, I need to apologize. I activated that beacon by accident. I didn't know what it was. I didn't mean to drag you into our war. I was just desperate and... Son, Cortez interrupted gently, you reached out when no one else would. When your entire civilization was facing extinction, you didn't give up. You kept searching for a solution. That's not a mistake. That's courage. The Admiral placed a hand on Trin's shoulder. You saved your people. Never apologize for that. The ceremony that followed was simple. The humans didn't want statues or monuments. They accepted a small token of gratitude, a crystal sculpture representing the bond between two civilizations, and that was enough. As the human ships prepared to depart, crowds gathered at every viewing port on the station. Families who had been saved by human intervention. Children who would grow up because of human sacrifice. Elderly Velthians who had thought they'd seen their last days. Vex stood at the command center window, watching the massive fleet begin its departure sequence. Rebecca stood beside him, preparing to board the last shuttle. Will we see you again? Vex asked. Maybe, Rebecca said with a slight smile. The galaxy's a big place. But you're not alone anymore. You have our communication codes. If you need help, call. We'll answer. She headed toward the shuttle bay, then paused and looked back. Take care of yourselves. And remember what we taught you. Defense isn't about being aggressive. It's about making sure no one can hurt the people you care about. The fleet jumped to hyperspace in waves, each group of ships disappearing in flashes of light until only the flagship remained. Then it too vanished, leaving Velthian space quieter but somehow safer than it had been in months. Aboard the indomitable, Admiral Cortez settled into his command chair. Lieutenant Tyler Parker approached with a data pad, his expression troubled. Sir, during our 3 months here, something interesting happened. Other civilizations were watching. They saw what we did. Now we're receiving distress calls. 17 different species from across the galaxy. All of them are asking for help. Cortez pulled up the star map. 17 points of light scattered across multiple sectors. 17 civilizations facing their own crises. 17 groups of people who had heard about humanity and dared to hope. Mark them all, Cortez said firmly. Contact Earth Command. Tell them to deploy the 2nd and 4th fleets. All of them, sir? Parker asked. That's a massive commitment of resources. The Admiral looked at the stars on his view screen. Out there, people were suffering. Families were being destroyed. Children were losing their parents. And now those people knew that someone might answer if they called for help. All of them, Lieutenant, Cortez said. We made a promise when we left Earth. No one fights alone anymore. And we keep our promises. The Indomitable turned toward the next crisis, toward the next call for help. Behind them, the Velthians began rebuilding their civilization with hope instead of fear. Ahead of them, 17 more species waited to learn what it meant when humans said they would help. The galaxy was changing. And humanity had only just begun.